I've always hated most horror films, probably because I grew up in an age where it began to become stale and it never bothered to stray from the norm anymore, like classics such as The Shining, The Thing, Alien did. We all know how horror movies are usually structured. You begin with a clueless, nameless individual unaware of the presence of some kind of fear-inducing monster or serial killer. That nameless individual is then killed to show that there is a danger that we will further encounter throughout the film. We then switch perspectives to a named individual which we follow throughout the story, and they also have a large to small group made up of stereotypical assholes, nerds, wimps, etc. Each of these members basically gets killed off one by the entity, and the only remaining survivor ends up being the main character. And at the end of the film, right when the character thinks they killed or got rid of the entity, a last minute scene reveals that the monster or serial killer is still alive and kills our named character. The end, roll credits. This is the formula we often see through the horror film genre, and as you can tell, this makes horror fucking suck, which directs us to the first point I'll be making in this video. Most horror fucking sucks. The method which these films consider horror to be horror is a simple jump scare. The first time you see it, you're like, second time, you're like, and the third time, you're like,
You're a fucking asshole.
Jump scares are a cheap sensation that use our fight or flight response to get a quick scare out of us. It's not hard to do that because it's just a sudden shift in the environment, whether it be through audio cues or a sudden visual pop-up. I can turn my head without expecting somebody to be there, only to have somebody be there where they shouldn't be, and I get the same reaction. Characters are also oftentimes just pure stupid and have no common sense. It also doesn't help that these films follow a half-long century stereotype of personalities consisting of the jock, the cheerleader, or the junkie. It's only recently we've finally begun to encounter films again that don't depend on mere sudden human reaction to create fear out of their audiences. Instead, these recent films create speculative events and ideas that slowly become more horrific and psychological in nature. Take the more recent films of The Lighthouse or The Witch, It Comes at Night, and Color Out of Space. They make stories out of a human being's real fears in order to reflect the real world, such as isolation, diseases, witchcraft cults, and horrifying cosmic anomalies. One such film that follows a similar method that I'll be talking about today in this video is the zombie flick known as Pontypool. It's a Canadian horror film made in 2009, directed by Bruce McDonald, and written by Tony Burgess. Tony Burgess was also the writer of the trilogy of novels on which this film is based on. Pontypool reminds me of A Quiet Place if it had more depth, as although both films' main horror elements arise from the limitations of speech, I feel there's more substance to the virus in Pontypool and how people need to solve the problem than the big-ass goofy aliens we see in A Quiet Place. I'm not saying A Quiet Place is bad, far from it actually. It's a great movie on its own merit. It's just seeing an alien creature for the billionth time in a horror movie is starting to get a little bit old. It also doesn't help that they showed it like 5 minutes into the fucking movie, removing any suspense or horror behind it. But be warned, from here on out there will be spoilers for the entirety of the film Pontypool, so I will recommend you watch the film first, then come back to this video. The film follows Grant Mazzy, a radio announcer in the small town of Pontypool, Ontario, Canada. Grant is accompanied by his technician Laurel Ann and the station manager Sydney. Together they work at a small radio station where a series of mysterious events transpire via various phone calls within the soundproof studio. We soon find out that there is some kind of virus that infects people. They begin to have cannibalistic tendencies and primal instincts such as stripping naked and communicating and infecting others through dialect. Now you may be asking, what the fuck do you mean infecting other people with dialect? What does that mean? That makes no sense. Well, what I mean is the main villain of the film is the English language. The zombies aren't zombies. In most other horror films, specifically zombie flicks, the infection is often transferred through a bite. It's obvious this would happen since it acts similar to that of a disease or a virus in real life would. The infected blood must come in contact with the uninfected blood in order to infect it. However, in Pontypool, the way the virus transfers itself onto a new host is through the use of language, particularly the words within the language. The director of the film, Bruce McDonald, even stated that the infected themselves are not zombies and instead should be considered conversationalists. A bit of a stupid name, I know, but it demonstrates the distinction made in actual mannerisms and presentation of the infected. The conversationalists are not undead, as they can still die from blood loss or the destruction of one's own internal organs, adding to the idea of a brainwashed living person that cannot control their actions rather than just a mindless undead creature. McDonald said this in an interview. There are 3 stages to this virus. The first stage is you might begin to repeat a word. Something gets stuck, and usually it's words that are terms of endearment like sweetheart or honey. The second stage is your language becomes scrambled and you can't express yourself properly. The third stage, you become so distraught at your condition that the only way out of the situation you feel as an infected person is to try and chew your way through the mouth of another person. From what I've heard, the books develop these concepts much more deeply by having various professions ranging from doctors, linguists, anthropologists, and art critics in order to try and understand where it originated from and how it's supposed to be treated. Now, to add a little bit of philosophy to this, the virus can actually be considered as following a semantic theory called the indirect reference, in which there is more meaning to the name than simply the object to which it refers. And the only cure is to remove and change the understanding of a specific word that may be infected. An example taken from the film may be kill is kiss. It follows the direct reference theory in which a person must truly claim the meaning of the word and its expression lies in what it points out in the world. Once again, kill is instead kiss. This imitation results in people having to speak in a completely different language. For example, our main character Grant and Sydney Breyer have to speak in French. Neither Sydney or Grant are fluent in this, thus they end up having to use a hybrid of the French and English language. This means that the easiest way to cure this linguistics virus is through a complete change in the intention of every single word in the English language. As it's not easy, but it is easier than trying to speak French. The film demonstrates the additional dread this virus has created by having the post-credits scene have Grant and Sydney be located in a completely different part of the world, possibly of Asian descent rather than Pontypool, as you can tell by Sydney's dress. Them being in an Asian country demonstrates that it's safer to be in a country where English is not spoken of natively or commonly. The way people need to survive is by having to completely change their actual personal character, as well as the words they speak. Speaking of words, Pontypool's fascinating writing. Pontypool's characters are executed with extreme detail, and are well acted to pull off what's actually going on. It's not Oscar worthy, but the intention of each actor's lines are done faultlessly. The actor must be able to emphasize what lines are important, and what words may be possibly suspect to the virus. For example, halfway through the film, one of the main characters begins to repeat the word missing. Missing had been frequently mentioned previously through a pre-recorded message. There was also visual imagery accompanied early on in the film to foreshadow its dangerous intent in being said. Each word is important and can be used against the characters at any given time. Therefore, we fear to even hear our protagonists speak, as we fear for their life. Every word must then be pinpointed by both character and audience member in order to create a constant sense of dread and uneasiness. The infected are not really shown much, as already having a glance at the effects of the virus via the previously stated infected character is enough to paint a picture of what the problems are. Since the film takes place in a radio station, the radio calls between characters give detail for where the people over the phone are located and what they see. Sometimes the film decides to create moments of pure terror and agony through mere awkward silence in order to never stray away from the slow pent-up horror the characters may be experiencing on the other side of the phone. The majority of the film never takes place outside of the radio station in order to ground and limit our perception to the characters, as they also have no idea what the hell is going on outside. A radio station is also a great way to play off the previously mentioned things that happen, as the only way you can communicate is through your voice, aka your words. The soundproof studio in which Grant sits in for most of the duration of the film is used as a defensive barrier, as well as adds limited space for characters to solve their problems in, meaning the film's delicate writing of each character's words and closed off atmosphere of the radio station result in the climax of the film to slowly blow out of proportion, whilst extremely limiting the area in which our protagonists must solve their problems. The conclusion. Pontypool's characters are not the driving force of the film. It's actually what the characters say, and how they say it, that causes interest to spark for the rest of the film. Its writing is extremely precise, as although all stories need good writing, the writing is the sole proprietor for why the film works so well, because it doesn't depend on having a monster or jump scare to hold up the film. It's the use of a unique antagonistic force, aka the dangers of opening your mouth and speaking, as it makes it seem as if it's only going to get worse if you keep speaking. If you're tired of the way the film industry handles horror, then this film will likely seem like a blessing in disguise, because nothing makes people crave a good story than the oversaturation of bad ones. Yeah, that's right, we're already at the end of the video. I'm mainly sticking to animation on this channel, so usually I won't be speaking about live action films unless it's a comparison to an anime or a film I'm extremely passionate about, like Pontypool. This video was also shorter than my previous works because I have another longer video in the works right now. Anyways, as always, if you actually want to talk about this film in the comments, just write anything down in the comments below and I will for sure reply to you and we can discuss it even more in depth. That's it for today. Bye bye!